In the distributed world, we go to the world. We get our stuff out there everywhere we can. There was a quote in the New York Times in a Brian Stelter story about 2 months ago that passed around like wildfire, and I'm sure you all heard. A college student said to a researcher, if the news is important enough, it will find me. So how do we be found in this new world? It's a new model, a new worldview. The brand becomes less the magnet to draw people in and more the descriptor once you get there. My 16-year-old son, Jake, JakeJarvis.com, who programs Facebook apps and does wonderful work, and I learn everything from him. He's my secret weapon. He goes to TechCrunch 20 times a day, but he never, ever, ever types in TechCrunch.com and says, gee, I wonder what Michael Arrington's going to tell me now. He only goes to the links it peers through Dig and Facebook and RSS feeds and blogs. I think that's where we have to think. So the audience becomes our distributor, and that leads to new models. Same time, I always hear people say, well, when is online going to pay for my newsroom? And my unfortunate answer is never, not the newsroom as it stands now. We don't need the same thing. So one group this afternoon will be looking at new newsroom structures. Yes, that comes from shrinking size, but there also become new opportunities for new efficiencies. We don't all need the TV critic, even though I was one. I got out of that. And we need new kinds of job descriptions. We need people who are going to work collaboratively with the community. So what does this structure look like is one of the tasks this afternoon. Do we even have a newsroom? There's Edward Russell's beautiful newsroom on top. Right? That's yours. I stole the picture from somewhere, so I don't have the rights to it. And there's a Mojo reporter in the car. I think it's the Bergen Record. Is it now that doesn't have a newsroom? Fort Myers. Fort Myers. That's Fort Myers there, but isn't it Bergen County doesn't have a newsroom? Right? And so do we even need the room? Why do we need the room? What do we need the room for? Or rather than looking at it as a newsroom, what about looking at it as a network? And the idea that we are working collaboratively with the public to do news. This is a chart that I hope you'll see later when Samir Arora from GLAM gets here. And GLAM is a very controversial business. I've talked about this before, and people will nitpick about it, and there are things to nitpick, that's fine. But I would urge you not to lose sight of the opportunities of this model. The GLAM model is pretty damn impressive, whether or not you like its execution at GLAM. And I'm surprised we haven't seen more attempts to do it in the news business. And that's one of the morals, I think, of today, is how do we look at using these new models in new ways. In the network model, we don't own it all. We work with the public. We become a platform that enables others to build things. You'll hear from Tom Evslin later about the economics of that network model. And they're, to me, who didn't stay awake in the econ class, very counterintuitive. But so much of this world is now counterintuitive. Until you've intuited, then it's not counterintuitive anymore. We get to critical mass a lot faster, a lot cheaper, with a lot less risk. I just wrote an op-ed that I'm trying to sell around, that if we look at this new economy here through the eyes of Google, we see that you grow to big size by growing networks, not by anymore by borrowing a lot of capital to buy companies. Those days are over for a while, I think. So then there's the question of the corporate structure we'll talk about, and Edward and Russell and Dave Morgan are going to talk about that shortly. Of course, we were one company before, and we were all inward focused. If we break it up, what do we look like? And if we don't have print someday, I'm not trying to kill print. Print's a good thing. I'm not trying to kill the article. It's a good thing. But if we don't, what do we really need? What's our relationship with ad sales? Do we need manufacturing, distribution? They'll talk about that. We end up then with these new company structures. And I would only urge there that we should plan for that world. Whether or not we think it's really going to come shortly, to not plan for it, I think, is irresponsible. Then we have the idea of public support. Please, sir, may I have some more? You should have Oliver going through your head now with that picture. Very important, I think, for today's work that there is no white knight. Just as there is no silver bullet, there is no white knight. We had the belief, a year ago, I would hear people say, if only blank would buy the blank, everything would be okay. If only it would go private. I see someone from Philadelphia nodding her head, Wendy Warren. God bless, somebody came along about the Philadelphia Inquirer, but debt is hard. And the business realities today are all the harder. Foundations don't have the means to support every bit of journalism in the country, nor should they. Journalism must be a sustainable business enterprise. I teach a course in entrepreneurial journalism here. It's not an oxymoron. And we've got to show that business can be journalism and journalism can be business. So we need desperately new revenue models. I wish I had them. I don't. I'm just a journalism professor. But I hope that there are some ideas here in new ad networks and marketplaces, perhaps, new kinds of networks, hyperlocal, whatever, new ad models. Maybe we sell relationships or targeting, or I'm working with a company called 33 Across that may be here later that tries to sell influence. Maybe we need new measurements to prove to the advertisers how wonderful we are. That's what's gone on before online. And maybe there's new side door revenue. Kevin McKean from Consumer Reports is here, and they've been very lucky. We all wish we could do what they do, but I don't think we can. And then there's Google. What's our relationship with Google, and what can we use to get it? Now, I don't mean to plug my book. Due out in January, Collins Publishers. Pick it up on the stands. It's on for sale for Amazon right now. But
where's the link?
As I did that, I tried to look at the world through Google's lenses and try to see what are the laws. And I had this first discussion with Martin Nissenholtz at the Online Publishers Association some time ago, where I was arguing that we have to think distributed. And Martin still said at the time, though he now has an API for the news, Vivian, you can talk about that later. But he said, no, some brands are still worth coming to. And that's true. The Times brand is worth coming to, but it's also worth distributing. How can we get this stuff out there in as many ways as possible? How do we become networks and platforms to enable a larger world to do more? How do we collaborate more? I'll skip that. I think, how do we have our own 20% rule for innovation? That's the greatest crime, I think, of all, is that we're just simply not doing enough innovation because we think we can't afford it, but we can't afford not to. We've got to get better about realizing that perfection is not the product, because we can't be. So life is a beta. Things will go out imperfectly. We will learn when we put them out imperfectly. That's probably the best lesson there is from Google. But first and foremost, we have to decide what business we're in. What are we really? We're not manufacturers. We're not distributors. Are we an information company? Well, information can become a commodity. Are we community companies? Not yet. We're not doing a very good job of that. I hope we become platforms and networks, but what are we? So, a lesson point. AOL thought it was a content company, which led, of course, to its disastrous merger with Time Warner, about which I'm still very bitter since I held on to the stock like an idiot. Feel better. AOL was, in fact, a community company. Its chat and its discussions led the way. It was, years before Facebook, it was Facebook. It just didn't know it. Yahoo, my whipping boy, thought it was a content company because they all want to be like us. They all want to be content companies, which led to be bait for Microsoft again and again and now again. In fact, it beat Google years before in advertising. It had the models long before. It could have been Google, but it wasn't. So I would ask that as you go to the sessions today and as you go this afternoon, rethink who we are. Have your existential moment. And take that as the basis at the beginning of the discussions to say, okay, what is the essence of journalism, the essence of its value to the community, the way we can monetize that value and support that value in new ways. And that's the whole point of today.